Happy Wednesday. Hello.
Hello.
I'm excited. Everyone, meet the one and only Aqua. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
It's going to be a great one. Full disclosure, everyone, we obviously saw each other before behind the scenes. Before that, I was wanting to make sure that I pronounce and introduce Aqua correctly. She was at whatever rolls off your tongue. So there we go. Here we are. And obviously, you'll have a chance to hear more about you. So I'm going to just give the floor back to you so everyone can know a little bit more about you and what you do.
All right. Well, once again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about having this conversation. I typically always start off by spelling out my name. So it's Akua. My dad's from Ghana. He calls me Ikria. My mom is from the US. She calls me Akua. And I grew up mostly in French-speaking West Africa and North Africa and worked for some time in Nigeria. And they typically refer to me as Aqua. I'm not picky about it. And the reason why I like starting off that way is just to give people an idea of the fact that I have a very, I guess you can say, multicultural background. I have parents from 2 different continents. And a lot of that really, I think, informs my work and definitely informs what I do as well as a coach. So I do executive and leadership coaching as a facilitator and also as a speaker. To me, what's really exciting is being able to bring lots of different ideas and give everyone the opportunity to make decisions for themselves of how they want to be perceived, how they want to come across, and how they want to share the value that they can provide to others.
Oh, I love it. Such a great, powerful introduction. Everyone, full disclosure, I attended one of Aqua's workshop as part of the I Am Remarkable initiative. And I very shyly knock at her door and be like, I really enjoyed your workshop. Would you like to come on the LinkedIn Live? And she said, yeah. She said, yeah, that's fine. Where it is. Like, let's make it happen. So there we go. I feel very, very honored to be on this side having the conversation. I know we are in portraits. So anyone listening to us, even live or as replay, I've got an eye on the comments. Any questions that comes to mind, any thoughts, any prompts that our conversation gives you, obviously feel free to share. This is very much a selfish conversation I'm having with Aqua right now, but this is obviously for you. So you join in, you do whatever you want to be part of this. And I think for starters, it could be very interesting for me to ask you self-promotion. What is this? Let's talk about this, the big topic.
Yes. And I'm a proud, member, proud part of the hashtag I'm Remarkable community and have been for a lot of years. Being part of the community has truly, I think, transformed not just my perspective on self-promotion, but how applying it can really support you with building your business and your career. I think that's something that's been so key, very crucial to getting to where I am today, right? We wouldn't be having this conversation if I had not self-promoted, if I had not put out there that I do these workshops, that I'd love for you to join. And so it really, at the end of the day, is such an important skill, I think, for anyone to really consider. So when I talk about self-promotion, I actually like to start with reflecting on self-promotion actually internally. I believe that the first element of self-promotion is really you as an individual being able to have a conversation with yourself, remind yourself of your own value, of your accomplishments, and the things that you can contribute. And those can be as small as I woke up today and took a shower, or as big as whatever you define as important within your personal life and your career. But I truly think it starts with you first, and it really starts with, that internal dialogue and creating space for that internal dialogue and reflection about your wins, right? And not what anyone else considers a win, not what anyone else considers big, or not what anyone else considers something that you should be recognized for, what you yourself considers to be important. I think,
if I may interrupt you, sorry for a second.
Please,
what if the internal dialogue is very pessimist? Like, I can't find a win. Who do you think you are? You know the drill. So what do you do with that?
Yeah, the first really is to, one, create the space to be able to even hear that inner dialogue, right? And even recognize it. I think so many of us are doing things and moving so quickly that we don't even have the space to necessarily acknowledge it. And then I think the second thing is around acknowledging it and recognizing that as human beings, we actually have evolved to be quite pessimistic in many ways. And it's a lot easier for us. We have this negativity bias. It's a lot easier for us actually to focus on the negative, to focus on what doesn't go well. I'm sure all of you can think back to a day where, one thing went wrong, right? 100 things went right, one thing went wrong. And what you do is you focus on that one wrong thing, right? Yeah, right. You're like, yes. And so what that means is we need to build habits and routines around cultivating our awareness around the things that are going right. So for me, what that involved was actually doing a bit of journaling. And when I say journaling, it wasn't like massive journaling. It simply was like, what are 3 things that went well today? Right. So giving yourself those prompts can really go a long way to rewire. Yes. Go a long way to help you rewire. And most importantly, just help you focus on, right? Because it's really about that focus, help you focus on what is going right. So as simple as journaling, like I said, I write 3 things that went well. You can think about it from the perspective more of gratitude, right? 3 things I'm grateful for, what you want to see more of. And, once again, as human beings, what we focus on, right, ultimately grows. And so it's really about it's not about forgetting what hasn't gone right, but just really recognizing that there might be more things going right, but that as human beings, because we have this natural negativity bias, we just need to be a bit more intentional about creating space to celebrate those wins, no matter how small. But I think we all, to some extent, have that, record playing in our head, have that negative narration or that negative, those negative thoughts coming through, but it's really about how can we create space also for the positive ones. And then when dealing with the negative, and once again, I use negative lightly because negative can really mean a range of things. So maybe not as constructive thoughts, we can maybe name it that. What can we do to process those? What can we do differently? And even ask ourselves, are those even important? Because a lot of times the things that are coming up might not actually be important to us. And so creating space for that as well, but really making sure we're intentional about celebrating, practicing gratitude, and recognizing the wins in our personal, professional life first.
Oh, that is so good. I mean, just to be checking, I've changed the speaker. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you absolutely fine.
Perfect. I think this is a very, very great first step. I love that you impact when it comes to, like you were saying, creating this space. It's recognizing what's happening in that space. And if in that space is very much self-criticism or whatever it is that we want to call that, like you were saying, is also objectively giving you the space to recognize, okay, but what is the positive? Like, how can we make sure we capture the whole picture? Thank you. I know I've been interrupting. You were in the flow of talking about self-promotion and you said it starts with yourself. And I could not agree more. I think it's one of those where, and I've seen that, and I think it's something that you probably have talked already about, the whole system as it is, which is especially when it comes to school, you do your work, you get a grade, and therefore you're used to being recognized through the hard work you put in. And I feel like a lot of people still have the expectation that whatever hard work they put in, that it's going to be recognized. But I feel like it's a nice reminder that, first of all, it's not always the case, and B, don't wait for people to recognize how much you've done. I think this is where the balance is completely imbalanced, right? It's when the expectations are 100% about what's going to happen on the other side and not with you. I feel like building up, it's almost like you've got an empty jar and building up that jar, right? Like through the journaling and cursing or whatever it is. I think it's a misstep. So I'm glad that you started there, but I didn't want it to interrupt your flow. So if there was the follow-up that you wanted to share, by all means.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you so much for interrupting me. And hopefully that what we just shared, both of us, really resonates with others, because I think that's where we always need to start, right? What's happening internally of us, and how can we focus on ourselves first? Because I think a lot of times where we have a mismatch, where we feel like maybe we're bragging or we're too much, is when we're too focused sometimes on that external validation, which of course is also very important for us as human beings, right? I'm not suggesting that external validation is always bad, right? We want that as human beings. We are social beings, right? We want to be accepted. We want to be seen as part of the group. I think that, naturally we also are motivated to try to achieve more, and self-promotion can support you with that. And so if we're shifting from thinking about self-promotion for more of that internal space and to the external space, what does that mean? That's going to look very different for everyone. And I also think that everyone's on this self-promotion journey. This is something that we talk a lot about in the hashtag I'm Remarkable initiative as well, that no two people see self-promotion in the same way. And so it's also very important to reflect on what self-promotion means to you within your workplace and also within your personal life as well. And I think that's something that we don't always consider, that we self-promote constantly, right? Even in our personal lives, when you're thinking about friends, the people you date, maybe even the person you marry, there are things that you share with them for them to be able to see your value in a certain way. A little different maybe from the workplace, but I still think it is self-promotion nevertheless. And so when we reflect on self-promotion for leaders, we're probably thinking mostly about the workplace. And there, I think self-promotion goes hand in hand with visibility, and goes hand in hand with really thinking about, if this is an environment I want to be in, right? If you work within a structured environment, or if you're more like me and you're an entrepreneur that works for themselves, right? Visibility looks a little bit different. The environment looks a little bit different. I'm leveraging maybe a little bit different techniques and tools, but ultimately, right, it's the question of, what does success look like to me, and how can I leverage self-promotion to be able to get closer to some of my goals? So a little bit more concretely, maybe within the workspace, if you want to climb the corporate ladder, maybe you want to be promoted, what are the sort of things that maybe you need to share? And what stakeholders do you need to share those accomplishments and the things that you can add to? I think that's another really important question that you need to ask, because that stakeholder might not be your direct manager, right? It might be a sponsor within your organization or a mentor within your organization. So getting just really clear about what success looks like as it relates to what career success or professional success looks like, you can then leverage self-promotion externally of you to help you get there. And it's going to look very different for everyone, right? For some people, it might be around building a personal brand on social media. So that's something that I leverage as an entrepreneur working with different clients. For others, it might be about building the right relationships and sharing the right things within those conversations and those relationships to help people see what's possible, right? It might be for some having the right conversation or saying the right things within an appraisal conversation, right? Making it very clear what it is you want. I want that promotion, and these are the reasons why. You can see by X, Y, and Z, I'm going to be able to do, A, B, C, right? If I'm offered this next opportunity. And so external self-promotion is a bit about, right, sharing, maybe being a bit more vocal. For some, having the evidence or receipts in the right context to really make sure you're able, once again, to get closer to those goals you have for your career or your professional life.
I love that. And actually, just hearing you, a couple of takeaways from me. And again, if anyone has any questions, any thoughts they want to share in the chat, please do so. First of all, I love the fact that you've demystified the self-promotion as in it's one avenue. It can take various shapes and forms. It starts with you at home or in your personal circle, whatever you want to call that. And it also, when it comes to the work side of things, it could be internal, it could be external. It's just, there is a lot going on in the self-promotion spectrum. It's not just, this is me and look at what I've done. I think a lot of people have this very one-sided vision of like, who is the biggest, loudest voice in the room? But actually, self-promotion is not necessarily that, especially if it's not aligned with you. So I think finding the way that works for you for self-promotion is an important one. And probably I would challenge anyone listening to this to go back to their personal life and think, what am I self-promoting on a daily basis that I didn't even know I was doing? Because a lot of people are like, can't do self-promotion. Well, spoiler alert, there is a high chance you're already doing it. You just haven't consciously thinking that this was self-promotion. So I think this is a big takeaway from what you shared. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the second thing
sorry.
No, that's good. And I think the other point, and this is where I wanted to go with you, because I know we're going to have some really priceless nuggets from your brain, is why self-promotion is important. And my two takeaways so far, like we were talking about at the beginning, is first of all for yourself. I think it's very important. It starts with you, like you were saying. And like you were also sharing, it's about making sure that with the self-promotion that you're doing, it's getting you closer to your goal. And it's not selfish. I literally published a video before going into this, like, let's stop talking about selfish being a bad thing. It really is about making sure that you prioritize yourself in a way that is collaborative. Like, it doesn't have to be destructive. I think a lot of people associate the self-promotion with, if I'm stepping up, then that means someone is stepping down or whatever it is. But it doesn't have to be this way. But love to hear from you. Additionally to that, or we can build on that. This is already a lot of solid reasons. Why would you say self-promotion is important? as a skill.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you started with that first bit of that personal piece, right? So research shows that practicing gratitude, recognizing your accomplishments as an individual helps your self-esteem. I think that's number one, right?
Yep.
Helps your self-esteem, keeps you motivated, helps to build your confidence. And I think that alone is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And then as it relates, of course, right, to your professional life, right? You know, if you've set goals, right, it definitely helps when we talk about it from the perspective also of executive presence. So from that angle, when we think about executive presence, that's a level of visibility, but also being able to have some level of followership as well. So people to be able to recognize that you have a level, and expertise isn't necessarily the right word, but that's what's coming to mind right now. But a level of expertise, a level of discernment is actually maybe a word that I like a little bit better, right? Your ability to apply the right things. And so you being able to talk about the value that you've provided, your previous accomplishments, and how those can, you know, translate to what you're doing now can help people to see what's possible as well. So from more of, I guess you can say, the professional sense, it's really helpful with, you know, allowing you to achieve your goals, whatever that looks like. Maybe you want to have a team. Maybe you want to climb the corporate ladder. Maybe you want to get additional clients. And then it can also help with that executive presence and visibility as well, where people can truly see like, hey, based on something they've done previously, I can potentially see how they can also support me as well. So that's also, I guess you can say, from that thought leadership perspective too.
Yeah. This is very interesting. And from your experience, what would you say is getting in the way of self-promotion for leaders?
Yeah. So in the hashtag I'm Remarkable world, we typically talk about, I guess, it's sort of three things. So I will probably share those three things within what I share. But I think the first is just really feeling like we live in a world where all I need to do is work hard. And by working hard, someone will see it and I'll get access to additional opportunities. So it's this internal story that we tell ourselves around like, you know, it's just about working hard. That's it. Work hard. The right things will come your way. And that does work for some people. Definitely doesn't work, I think, for the majority of the world. But it does, you know, potentially work for some people. But I'm sure everyone listening to this can think back to a time where they worked hard and they weren't offered that promotion, or they weren't given that next opportunity, or they were overlooked. And so working hard is not always enough. You do have to take the time to not just reflect on what you've contributed, but maybe share what you've contributed with the right stakeholders. So that's the first story that tends to come up for some people. For others, it might simply just be like, you know, as simple as like, you know, self-promotion's bad, right? So self-promotion's bad. You know, self-promotion's bragging. You know, when you self-promote, people look at you a certain way, and I don't want to be looked at in that way. You can also sometimes, you know, I've also heard clients and people within the workshop talk about self-promotion as not something they do, right? So at that identity level, I'm a woman, therefore I don't self-promote. I'm an introvert, therefore I don't do X, Y, and Z, right? Related to self-promotion. So those are some of the inner sort of narratives that tend to come up, right? You know, self-promotion's bad. I'm not the type of person who self-promotes, or I just need to work hard. And once again, those are all legitimate stories. Those are stories that might have worked at some point in time, maybe within your career, or, you know, within the career of maybe someone having a conversation with you about self-promotion. But ultimately, I think it's really important for all of us to get curious and really reflect on whether or not those stories have supported us towards our goals. So those are, I think, the first set. And then the second set tends to be a little bit more external, right? And I will say some of those stories can also come from external sources. So for example, you could have a mother or a parent or a teacher, or even someone that you work with that says, hey, like self-promotion's bad, stop self-promoting. Like, who do you think you are? And then you can you can end up with this inner narrative of like, hey, I shouldn't self-promote. Like, it's not a good thing.
Have internalized what came from the outside world. Yes.
Exactly. Right. And so that becomes even more, I guess, an issue as it relates to thinking about potentially culture, right? So different cultures, different family structures, different ways in which we've been conditioned and socialized can also have an impact on our relationship with self-promotion as well. And so I think it's really interesting to then go from some of these narratives and stories we tell ourselves and then start to reflect on where could this have come from, right? And it could, you know, potentially come from how you were raised. It could come from, you know, the types of schools you went to. Another thing, you know, recently I was having hosting a workshop about difficult conversations. And one of the things that we talked about as it relates to difficult conversations is recognizing that, and I think it's the same, right? So the skill of being able to have difficult conversations, the skill of self-promotion, It also could be very much influenced by what you actually studied. Right. So for example, someone maybe who did more like sales and marketing, has been in sales and marketing roles, maybe are more willing to self-promote, right? If you take a look at a lot of the people that tend to shine and show up, especially on social media, they might have more of that background because that's something that tends to be celebrated, something that's incentivized, and also something that they might be good at. They have those skills.
Yeah.
But maybe people who, right, went to different types of schools and focused on, different industries and worked within different industries, self-promotion is not seen the same way, right? So there's many different things that can definitely have an impact on your, not just willingness to self-promote, but your ability to self-promote as well, right? Having that skill. And so I think reflecting on some of those key pieces. So that first piece, once again, what are the inner narratives, right? That I already have the stories. And then like, what environments have I been in? What stories, what cultures could also have an impact on those inner narratives and even on how I show up as well.
They're so good. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen that through your work. I'm sure to an extent it might have come up, but we tend to carry with us, with or without realizing it, so many luggages from the past, especially childhood, like things that might seem genuine from our parents. I don't know, like, don't brag in front of your sister or whatever that is, could just shape fundamentally who we are and actually prevent us, get in the way of our true sort of happiness in the sense of thriving to our full potential. So I think, listening to those stories. And I think this is where also journaling is good, because if you ended up at the end of the day really struggling to find 3 good things, well, I think it says a lot about the inner chatter and where your mind is focusing. Because simple things like, it was sunny today, and for anyone based in London, you know how much we've been waiting for this the entire summer. This is worth getting into the journal.
I mentioned great, like I do, like I said, my gratitude is sort of the angle I take as it relates to self-promotion. And so I talk about the weather was nice. That's important to me. And it has an impact on us, whether or not we're aware of it or whether or not we want to admit it.
Yeah, with plants. We need vitamin D. So there we go.
Yeah.
So I think this is really, really important. I would love to have your thoughts when it comes to having a supportive network. Like, for example, we've talked a lot, the two of us are facilitators for the hashtag I Am Remarkable initiative led by Google. There we go. This is obviously something that is free, that is accessible, but I'd love to have your thoughts when it comes to people who might be knowing they have something they have to change, but they don't know how to start, where to start. I feel like sometimes having a supportive pool of people, whether you know them or whether you're not, it could be helpful for you. Like, do you have any other thoughts around like surrounding yourself with the right people or the right potential things you can do additionally to journaling to ignite that fire of getting started when it comes to self-promotion?
Yeah. I mean, within the initiative, we definitely share, some actions you can take, some tools, additional tools that you can use, some activities you can do. But I think one thing that really comes to mind as it relates to sort of surrounding yourself, with people maybe that can support you on this journey is really just recognizing that there's nothing wrong with finding another group to support you with this. One of the things I've heard time and time again within, doing these workshops, and I think now I've done over 90, and then also thinking about my own self-promotion journey is really just recognizing that context is really important. And so there are certain things that I will share with my friends, certain things I'll share with my family, certain things I will share, on social media related to my work. And I don't think that is me being defragmented or like picking and choosing. I think it's about being intentional and recognizing that different audiences have a different, if we're thinking about it from the perspective of external self-promotion, a different, like, what's in it for me, right? And I think that discernment, I think discernment is such an important word, I think is really important as it relates to thinking about building that self-promotion skill. So I guess one thing that comes to mind is, hey, like, don't get upset if you find someone that you think you want to practice with that maybe isn't as comfortable practicing self-promotion or isn't into, thinking about self-promotion, because we all are on this journey. All of us are in different places. And so, if you do have the opportunity to join a hashtag I'm Remarkable session, like, keep in touch with the other people in the workshop. I think those would probably be a really great place to start. And you might find that you're actually a lot more open and it's easier to practice self-promotion with people who are all within this mindset and that have had the opportunity to have a similar base level of knowledge related to it. I also, of course, recommend that you reflect on people within your personal and professional life that you think do a good job with self-promotion. Once again, if you approach them to get their perspective, please recognize that they might not define it as self-promotion. They might see it in a different way. They might talk about it in a different way, and that's absolutely fine. But finding your own role models, finding people you think that do a good job of self-promotion, whether it's verbal or, through the written form, post on Instagram or LinkedIn, I think is also a really good place to start, and a good place for you to start to reflect on what is my own voice, right? What is the authentic way in which I want to share what I can contribute in the things I've accomplished as well.
I love that. And probably this is one of the simple yet complicated things to put in place, because I feel like, and myself included, for a long time, I was influenced by what I had in front of me, but I didn't realize I had the power to influence who I had in front of me. Like a simple exercise like curating my LinkedIn feed, for example, was an important thing that I did. I was like, game changer. I see what I want to learn about, what I know could be helpful to my community. And it works the same whether you run your own business, whether you are in a company that you work with or for, is that whether you've got the right people in front of you in the circle immediately is almost irrelevant, in the sense that you can create your own circle. I mean, it's great that you have the right people in your own circle, you know what I mean? But point is, don't feel like you have to constrain to what you have. Like you're saying, you can go out there and you can do some outreach. Don't also be disappointed if the person is not available or is not necessarily on the same wavelength, but get out there, essentially create and curate who are the people that you feel could be a source of inspiration and help you to see what's the next step for you, essentially. Oh, I love that. Great one.
Yeah.
Conscious of time flies when you're having fun. Got a few minutes left. I know I've led with some specific questions. So any final thoughts that you want to share to anyone listening to us when it comes to self-promotion, being a leader, anything that comes to mind that we haven't talked about?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, start by taking action and trying. It's going to feel really weird and maybe even inauthentic when you first start, and that's okay. I still get, somewhat, uncertain when I post things on LinkedIn and, on social media and those sorts of things. And I've been doing this now for about 5 years. So I don't think it necessarily goes away. I think what shifts and changes for me is that I'm just so clear on my why, so clear on that intentionality piece, that even though it is uncomfortable, it does still create some anxiety. I have a better understanding of what the end goal is. And I guess you can say I've also collected evidence to help to prove like, hey, like doing this does lead to the results that I want. And so I would just recommend that everyone just take the time to experiment, to try. And there's nothing wrong with deciding that, an approach that you've tried is not something that you want to use moving forward.
Oh, I love that. Like you were saying, self-promotion can take so many shapes and forms. Don't pressurize yourself to go for one or the one that you've seen around you. Doesn't mean that it's the one that works. Alleviate some pressure and actually make sure that you give yourself some time to experiment and try. I love that. What a great way to finish. Thank you so much for your time, Akua. It was amazing. It flew by. It definitely flew by.
It did. I can't believe. Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at the time. I'm like, wait. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This was a ton of fun. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So anyone listening to this, if you're looking for some help, some support when it comes to self-promotion, Akua, as she said, has been facilitating more than 90 trainings when it comes to I Am Remarkable. Feel free to reach out to her. Feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.